60 minutes of Marcus Aurelius Meditations for Mental Clarity. Introduction. Have you ever felt like your mind is a battlefield, with thoughts clashing against each other in an endless war that leaves you exhausted and confused? In today's world, where notifications constantly demand our attention and information bombards us from every direction, mental clarity has become as rare as it is precious. What if I told you that a Roman emperor who ruled nearly 2,000 years ago, a man who led armies, governed an empire, and faced personal tragedies that would break most of us, had already discovered the antidote to this modern affliction? Marcus Aurelius, often called the philosopher-king, wrote private notes to himself that have survived the centuries, offering us timeless wisdom on how to find clarity amidst chaos. These notes, known today as meditations, weren't meant for publication. They were Marcus's personal reflections, written by candlelight in military camps on the frontiers of the empire, or in the quiet moments before dawn in his palace. This makes them uniquely authentic, not polished philosophical treatises meant to impress others, but practical reminders a busy man wrote to himself about how to maintain mental clarity while carrying the weight of the known world on his shoulders. Think about that for a moment. If Marcus could find mental clarity while dealing with plague, war, betrayal, and the countless demands of ruling an empire, imagine what his wisdom could do for you as you navigate your comparatively simpler life. Tonight, I'll share with you 7 powerful principles from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that can transform your mental landscape from a chaotic battlefield into a clear, calm space where wisdom can flourish. These aren't complicated techniques requiring years of philosophical study. They're practical insights that have stood the test of time precisely because they work with our human nature rather than against it. As you listen, I invite you to let go of the day's distractions. Whether you're driving home from work, preparing dinner, exercising, or simply sitting in a quiet room, allow Marcus's ancient wisdom to gently guide you toward that state of mental clarity we all desperately need in our modern world. Let's begin our journey through the mind of one of history's wisest rulers and discover how his insights can bring clarity to your life today. In the next hour, I'll guide you through 7 transformative principles from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that can help you achieve mental clarity in any situation. We'll explore how to distinguish between what you can and cannot control, how to view obstacles as opportunities, how to rise above the opinions of others, how to embrace impermanence, how to live in accordance with nature, how to practice gratitude even in difficult times, and how to remember your place in the cosmos. Each principle will include Marcus's original insights, practical applications for your modern life, and specific exercises you can implement immediately. By the end of our time together, you'll have a powerful toolkit for achieving mental clarity drawn from the wisdom of one of history's greatest philosopher-kings. Let's begin with the first principle. Without further delay, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. These words, written by Marcus Aurelius in his personal journal, contain perhaps the most fundamental principle for achieving mental clarity: the ability to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot is the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy and the foundation upon which mental clarity is built. Think about what's cluttering your mind right now. Perhaps it's a conflict at work, financial concerns, relationship issues, or worries about the future. Now, ask yourself, how much of this mental noise involves things outside your control? Marcus understood that much of our mental confusion stems from failing to make this crucial distinction. We exhaust ourselves trying to control the uncontrollable. Other people's opinions, external events, the past, the economy, the weather, while neglecting what we actually can control: our judgments, our values, our responses, our actions. In Book 8 of his Meditations, Marcus reminds himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This insight isn't merely philosophical, it's profoundly practical. When we clearly distinguish between what we can and cannot control, the mind naturally becomes clearer, like muddy water settling when left undisturbed. Consider how Marcus applied this principle in his own life. As emperor, he faced challenges that would overwhelm most of us: barbarian invasions, political conspiracies, plague ravaging the empire, even the betrayal of his closest friend and co-emperor, Lucius Verus. Yet, in his writings, we see him repeatedly drawing this distinction, focusing his energy on what he could control, his responses, his decisions, his character, while accepting what he could not. When his adopted brother and co-ruler betrayed him by attempting to seize sole power, Marcus didn't waste mental energy on resentment or revenge, things outside his control. Instead, he focused on what he could control, maintaining his own integrity and making wise decisions for the empire. This clarity of focus allowed him to respond with wisdom rather than react from confusion. How might this principle apply in your life? Imagine you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. The traffic itself is beyond your control. No amount of frustration, horn honking, or mental resistance will make those cars move faster. But what can you control? Your response to the situation. You can choose to use the time productively, perhaps listening to an audiobook or mentally preparing for your meeting. You can choose to call ahead and let people know you'll be late. You can choose to maintain your equanimity rather than allowing frustration to cloud your mind. This simple shift from focusing on external circumstances to focusing on your response immediately brings clarity. The mental fog of frustration lifts, revealing the clear path of constructive action. Marcus offers another powerful insight related to this principle. In Book 5, he writes, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Here, Marcus reminds us that our judgments about events, not the events themselves, cause our distress, and judgments are firmly within our control. Let's apply this to a common scenario. Perhaps a colleague criticized your work in a meeting. The criticism itself is an external event. It has already happened and cannot be changed. But your judgment about what this means, "My colleague doesn't respect me," or "This will damage my career," is within your control. By recognizing these judgments as interpretations rather than facts, you create space for mental clarity. Try this exercise. Think of something currently causing you mental distress. Now, separate the bare facts of the situation from your judgments about it. For example, the fact might be, "My project deadline was moved up by 2 weeks." Your judgment might be, "This is unfair," or "I'll never be able to deliver quality work in this time frame." Can you see how the judgment creates the distress, not the fact itself? By practicing this separation, fact from judgment, you develop the ability to see situations more clearly. This doesn't mean you ignore problems or become passive. Quite the opposite. By clearing away the mental fog of judgments about what you cannot control, you can focus your energy more effectively on what you can control: your plans, your actions, your responses. Marcus himself was no stranger to overwhelming responsibilities. As emperor, countless matters demanded his attention daily. Yet, he maintained clarity by continually returning to this fundamental distinction. In Book 6, he writes, "Everywhere and at all times, it is in your power to accept reverently your present condition, to behave justly to those around you, and to apply your skill to your present thoughts, that nothing unexamined should steal into them." Notice the three elements within his control that Marcus identifies: his attitude toward circumstances, his behavior toward others, and his attention to his own thoughts. By focusing on these areas, all within his control, he maintained clarity amidst the chaos of ruling an empire. This principle becomes particularly powerful when facing life's biggest challenges. When Marcus's wife Faustina died, he couldn't control the fact of her death, but he could control how he honored her memory, how he cared for their children, and how he continued to fulfill his duties despite his grief. This clarity of focus allowed him to move forward with wisdom, rather than being paralyzed by circumstances beyond his control. The practice of distinguishing between what we can and cannot control isn't about resignation or passivity. It's about clarity and effectiveness. By focusing our energy where it can actually make a difference, we become more powerful, not less. As Marcus puts it, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up about things you can't control." Imagine the mental clarity that comes from releasing the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Like putting down a heavy backpack you've been carrying uphill, the immediate sense of relief creates space for clear thinking and wise action. View obstacles as opportunities. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This profound insight from Marcus Aurelius offers us the second principle for mental clarity: viewing obstacles not as roadblocks, but as the path itself. When we encounter challenges, our minds often become clouded with frustration, disappointment, or fear. Marcus teaches us to see these very obstacles as opportunities for growth, learning, and the exercise of virtue. In Book 5 of Meditations, Marcus elaborates, "Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This perspective shift is revolutionary. Instead of seeing obstacles as unfortunate interruptions to our plans, which creates mental resistance and confusion, we can see them as integral to our journey, as the very material we need to advance. Consider how Marcus applied this principle in his own life. During his reign, Rome faced a devastating plague that killed millions, including members of his own family. Rather than viewing this catastrophe solely as a tragedy, Marcus recognized it as an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, compassion, and resilience. He implemented public health measures, provided for orphans and widows, and maintained social stability during a time of crisis. The obstacle, the plague, became the way for him to embody the virtues he valued. How might this principle apply in your life? Perhaps you've been laid off from your job. The conventional view sees this as purely negative, a roadblock to financial security and career advancement. But with Marcus's perspective, you might ask, how can this obstacle become my way forward? Perhaps it creates space to pursue a long-neglected passion, develop new skills, or find work better aligned with your values. The obstacle itself contains opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. This shift in perspective immediately brings mental clarity, instead of the clouded thinking that comes from resisting reality. You engage constructively with what is, seeing possibilities where others see only problems. Marcus offers another insight related to this principle. In Book 4, he writes, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." This reminds us that our interpretation of events shapes our experience more than the events themselves. By choosing to view obstacles as opportunities, we transform our experience from one of frustration to one of engagement and growth. Try this exercise. Think of a current challenge you're facing. Now, instead of focusing on how it blocks your preferred path, ask yourself, how might this obstacle be the path itself? What opportunities does it contain that wouldn't exist otherwise? What strengths or virtues can I develop by engaging with this challenge? This doesn't mean denying difficulties or pretending problems are pleasant. Marcus wasn't suggesting we ignore reality. Rather, he advocated seeing reality more completely, recognizing that obstacles contain opportunities that our initial resistance might blind us to. The practice becomes particularly powerful when facing significant life challenges. When Marcus's friend and co-emperor Lucius Verus died, he couldn't change that reality. But he could use the experience to deepen his appreciation for life's fragility, strengthen his commitment to his duties, and practice the compassion he valued. The obstacle, grief, became the way to greater wisdom and humanity. This principle applies equally to everyday annoyances. Stuck in a long line at the grocery store? This obstacle can become the way to practice patience, to enjoy a moment of mindfulness, or to engage in a friendly conversation with another person waiting. The traffic jam that delays your commute? An opportunity to listen to an educational podcast, or enjoy music you love. By viewing obstacles as opportunities, we maintain mental clarity in two ways. First, we avoid the confusion that comes from resisting reality. Second, we engage our creative problem-solving abilities rather than our complaint-generating tendencies. This keeps our minds clear, focused, and constructive rather than clouded by frustration. Marcus himself faced countless obstacles as emperor, military threats, political opposition, personal losses. Yet he maintained clarity by consistently applying this principle, seeing each challenge not as an unfortunate interruption to his plans, but as the very substance of a life well lived. As he wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, insofar as it stands ready against the accidental and the unforeseen, and is not apt to fall." This wrestling metaphor is telling. A dancer follows a choreographed routine and is thrown off by unexpected changes. A wrestler, however, responds dynamically to whatever the opponent does, using the opponent's movements as opportunities rather than obstacles. Mental clarity comes from adopting this wrestler's mindset, ready to work with whatever life presents, rather than wishing for a different reality. Think about how often mental fog descends when we resist what is happening. We waste precious mental energy fighting against reality rather than working with it. This shouldn't be happening, we tell ourselves, as if our preference could alter what already is. Marcus would remind us that this resistance creates confusion, while acceptance creates clarity. In Book 10, he writes, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." Notice the active quality of this acceptance, not resignation, but wholehearted engagement with reality as it is. This engagement is what transforms obstacles into opportunities. The fire that burns down your home is devastating, certainly, but it also creates the opportunity to rebuild, perhaps with a design better suited to your current needs. The illness that confines you to bed forces a pause that might allow for reflection and reassessment of priorities. The relationship that ends painfully creates space for new connections and self-discovery. Marcus himself demonstrated this principle when facing the rebellion of Avidius Cassius, a trusted general who declared himself emperor while Marcus was still alive. Rather than viewing this betrayal solely as a threat, Marcus saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate mercy and wisdom. When Cassius was killed by his own soldiers, Marcus ordered that the general's head not be brought to him, and expressed sorrow at being deprived of the opportunity to forgive his former friend. This capacity to find opportunity in obstacle is not a gift some are born with and others lack. It's a mental discipline that can be cultivated through practice. Each time you encounter a challenge, large or small, pause and ask, where is the opportunity here? How can this obstacle become my way forward? With consistent practice, this perspective becomes second nature. The mind naturally begins to seek the opportunity within the obstacle rather than simply reacting with resistance. This shift brings immediate mental clarity as energy previously spent on resistance becomes available for creative engagement. Rise above the opinions of others. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. With this observation, Marcus Aurelius identifies one of the most common sources of mental confusion: our preoccupation with what others think of us. Our third principle for mental clarity involves freeing ourselves from this preoccupation and learning to value our own judgment above external validation. In Book 12 of Meditations, Marcus writes, "How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself to make it just and holy." This insight cuts to the heart of how much mental energy we waste worrying about others' opinions, energy that could be directed toward clarity of thought and purpose. Think about how often your mental clarity is disrupted by concerns about what others might think. Perhaps you hesitate to speak your mind in a meeting because you fear colleagues' judgment. Maybe you make career choices based on what will impress others rather than what truly fulfills you. Or perhaps you exhaust yourself maintaining a social media presence that portrays your life as more exciting or successful than it actually is. All of these behaviors scatter our mental energy and cloud our clarity. When we're constantly looking outward for validation, we lose touch with our inner compass, the only reliable guide to what truly matters in our lives. Marcus understood this challenge intimately. As emperor, he was surrounded by people eager to flatter him, criticize him behind his back, or manipulate him for their own advantage. He knew that if he allowed himself to be swayed by every opinion, he would lose his center and with it, his ability to govern wisely. In Book 4, he reminds himself, "I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others." This paradox, that we trust others' judgments about us more than our own, is a primary source of mental confusion. How does this principle apply in your life? Consider how much mental clarity you might gain by releasing your concern about others' opinions. Imagine making decisions based solely on your values and judgment, without the clouding influence of anticipated praise or criticism. Picture the mental spaciousness that would come from no longer carrying the burden of others' expectations. This doesn't mean becoming inconsiderate or dismissive of feedback. Marcus wasn't advocating for arrogance or isolation. Rather, he was suggesting a reordering of priorities, valuing your own well-considered judgment above the often fickle opinions of others. In Book 8, he writes, "It is in our power to have no opinion about a thing, and not to be disturbed in our soul. For things themselves have no natural power to form our judgments." Here, Marcus reminds us that we choose which opinions to value. We can choose to give more weight to our own carefully formed judgments than to the casual opinions others may have about us. Try this exercise. Think of a recent situation where a concern about others' opinions clouded your thinking or prevented you from acting authentically. Now, imagine revisiting that situation while caring only about your own well-considered judgment. How would your thoughts, feelings, and actions differ? What clarity might you gain? This principle becomes particularly powerful when making important life decisions. When considering a career change, relationship commitment, or other significant choice, ask yourself, am I making this decision based on what others will think, or on what I truly value and believe? The answer often reveals whether you're acting from clarity or confusion. Marcus himself faced this challenge when making unpopular but necessary decisions as emperor. When he raised taxes to fund the defense of the empire's borders, many criticized him. When he showed mercy to defeated enemies, some called him weak. Yet, he maintained his course, guided by his own judgment rather than public opinion. In Book 4, he offers this powerful reminder: how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it. Applied to our concern with others' opinions, we might say, how much more grievous is the mental confusion caused by worrying about others' judgments than simply accepting that not everyone will approve of us. This doesn't mean ignoring all feedback. Marcus valued the counsel of wise advisors and considered their perspectives carefully. But he distinguished between thoughtful advice offered with good intentions, and the casual judgments, gossip, and criticism that so often cloud our thinking. The practice of rising above others' opinions creates mental clarity in several ways. First, it simplifies decision-making by reducing the variables you need to consider. Second, it aligns your actions with your values, reducing the cognitive dissonance that comes from living inauthentically. Third, it frees mental energy previously spent on impression management for more constructive purposes. Consider how Marcus applied this principle during the Antonine Plague that devastated Rome during his reign. Public opinion might have pressured him to flee the city for his own safety, as many wealthy Romans did. Instead, he remained in Rome, helping to organize relief efforts and demonstrating solidarity with the suffering populace. His clarity of purpose to serve the common good overrode any concern about those who might criticize him for risking his life. This principle doesn't develop overnight. Like any mental discipline, it requires practice. Begin by simply noticing how often your thoughts and decisions are influenced by anticipated reactions from others. This awareness itself begins to create space between you and the habit of seeking external validation. Next, practice making small decisions based solely on your own judgment. What book do you truly want to read, regardless of what's popular? What clothes do you actually prefer to wear, setting aside fashion trends? What activity genuinely refreshes you, regardless of what others consider a good use of time? As you build this muscle with small choices, gradually apply it to more significant areas. With practice, you'll find yourself naturally valuing your own well-considered judgment above the shifting opinions of others. The result is a remarkable clarity of mind, the freedom to think and act from your center rather than being pulled in countless directions by others' expectations. Marcus captures this freedom beautifully in Book 4. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. Mental clarity comes not from aligning with popular opinion, but from the courage to think for yourself. Embrace impermanence. Time is a sort of river of passing events, and strong is its current. No sooner is a thing brought to sight than it is swept by, and another takes its place, and this too will be swept away. With these words, Marcus Aurelius introduces our fourth principle for mental clarity, embracing the impermanent nature of all things. When we resist the fundamental truth that everything changes, our minds become clouded with attachment, aversion, and anxiety. When we accept impermanence, we gain the clarity that comes from aligning with reality rather than fighting against it. In Book 4 of Meditations, Marcus elaborates, "Remember that all is opinion. Clear your mind of all that. Let the ruling and master principle within you be undisturbed by the movements of the flesh, whether pleasant or painful. And let it not combine with them, but set a bound to these affections and limit their control to their proper parts of the body. But when these affections rise to your mind by sympathy with the affected part, as must happen with a unified organism, you should not attempt to resist the sensation, which is natural enough, but do not let the ruling center add its opinion that the experience is good or bad." This passage reveals Marcus's sophisticated understanding of how attachment clouds mental clarity. He recognizes that sensations and emotions naturally arise, but it's our clinging to them, our insistence that pleasant states remain and unpleasant ones depart, that creates mental confusion. Think about how much of your mental fog comes from resisting change. Perhaps you're holding on to a relationship that has run its course, clinging to a self-image that no longer serves you, or fighting against the natural aging process. Or maybe you're resisting an unpleasant situation, wishing it would end immediately, rather than engaging with it constructively while it lasts. Both forms of resistance, clinging to what's changing and rejecting what's present, create mental turbulence. Marcus teaches us that clarity comes from accepting the flow of experience without excessive attachment or aversion. Consider how Marcus applied this principle in his own life. As emperor, he witnessed the rise and fall of political allies and enemies. He experienced the death of his co-emperor, several of his children, and many close associates. The empire itself faced constant change, borders shifting, alliances forming and dissolving, economic conditions fluctuating. Through it all, Marcus maintained clarity by embracing rather than resisting these changes. In Book 2, he reminds himself, bear in mind that everything that exists is already fraying at the edges and in transition, subject to fragmentation and to rot, or that everything was born to die. This isn't pessimism, but clear-sighted realism, a recognition that impermanence is not a flaw in the system, but the system itself. How might this principle apply in your life? Consider a current situation you're resisting. Perhaps it's a health challenge, a career setback, or a relationship difficulty. How might your experience change if you fully accepted the impermanent nature of this situation? Not in a passive, resigned way, but with the clear understanding that this too shall pass, as all things do. Or consider something you're clinging to, perhaps success, youth, or a particular identity. How might your experience change if you held these more lightly, appreciating them fully while they're present, but not grasping at them as they naturally change? Marcus offers another powerful insight related to this principle. In Book 7, he writes, "Think of the life you have lived until now as over and as a dead man. See what's left as a bonus and live it according to nature. Love the hand that fate deals you and play it as your own, for what could be more fitting?" This perspective, seeing each day as an unexpected gift rather than an entitlement, creates immediate mental clarity. Try this exercise. For the next 24 hours, practice seeing everything in your experience as if you were encountering it for both the first and last time. The morning coffee, the commute to work, the conversation with a colleague, the evening meal. Approach each as a unique event that will never be repeated in exactly the same way. Notice how this perspective cuts through habitual mental patterns and reveals the vivid clarity of direct experience. This principle becomes particularly powerful when facing major life transitions. When Marcus's wife Faustina died after 30 years of marriage, he couldn't change that reality. But he could approach his grief with the understanding that all relationships, like all living things, have their season. This didn't diminish his love or his grief, but it did provide the clarity to continue living and serving with purpose rather than being consumed by loss. In Book 9, Marcus writes, "Acquire the contemplative way of seeing how all things change into one another, and constantly attend to it, and exercise yourself in this part of philosophy, for nothing is so conducive to elevation of mind. This contemplative way of seeing is precisely what creates mental clarity, the ability to perceive the constant flow of change without being swept away by attachment or aversion. The practice of embracing impermanence doesn't mean becoming detached or indifferent. Marcus wasn't advocating for emotional numbness, but for a clear-eyed engagement with life as it actually is, constantly changing. This engagement allows for full appreciation of what's present without the mental cloudiness that comes from demanding that things remain the same. Consider how Marcus applied this principle to his own mortality. As emperor, he could have surrounded himself with flattery and luxury, avoiding all reminders of his inevitable death. Instead, he kept memento mori, reminders of mortality, close at hand. In Book 2, he writes, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This awareness of impermanence didn't create despair, but urgency and clarity, a recognition of what truly matters in a finite life. This principle applies equally to positive and negative experiences. When enjoying success or pleasure, the awareness that this too shall pass doesn't diminish the experience, but deepens it, infusing it with poignancy and presence. When enduring hardship or pain, the same awareness provides comfort and perspective. This difficulty, like all things, is impermanent. The mental clarity that comes from embracing impermanence is like the clarity of a mountain stream, constantly flowing, never stagnant. When we resist change, our minds become like stagnant pools, clouded with the debris of attachment and aversion. When we accept change, our minds flow freely, reflecting reality clearly without distortion. Marcus captures this quality in Book 4. If you work at that which is before you, following right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract you, but keeping your divine part pure, as if you might be bound to give it back immediately. If you hold to this, expecting nothing, fearing nothing, but satisfied with your present activities according to nature, and with heroic truth in every word and sound which you utter, you will live happy, and there is no man who is able to prevent this. This is the clarity that comes from embracing impermanence, the ability to be fully present with what is, without the mental cloudiness created by clinging to the past or anxiously anticipating the future. It's a clarity that allows us to see reality as it is, not as we wish it would remain or fear it might become. In our modern world, where constancy is often valued above change and comfort above growth, Marcus's wisdom is particularly relevant. By embracing rather than resisting impermanence, we align ourselves with the fundamental nature of reality. This alignment itself creates mental clarity, the freedom from the confusion that comes from fighting against what cannot be changed. As you move through your day, practice noticing the impermanent nature of all experiences, the pleasant ones you might wish would last forever, and the unpleasant ones you might wish would end immediately. Simply acknowledging this too shall pass can create a spaciousness in the mind, a clarity that comes from releasing the demand that reality be other than it is. Remember Marcus's words, "All is ephemeral, fame, and the famous as well." This recognition that nothing lasts forever, neither our troubles nor our triumphs, is not cause for despair, but for clarity. When we stop expecting permanence from an impermanent world, our minds clear of confusion, and we can see reality as it truly is, a constant flow of change, rich with both challenge and opportunity. Live in accordance with nature. He who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe. With this profound insight, Marcus Aurelius introduces our fifth principle for mental clarity: living in accordance with nature. For the Stoics, nature had a specific meaning. It referred not just to the natural world of trees, rivers, and stars, but to the fundamental order of the cosmos, including human nature itself. Mental clarity comes from aligning our lives with this deeper order rather than fighting against it. In Book 8 of Meditations, Marcus writes, "Everything that happens is either endurable or not. If it's endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. If it's unendurable, then stop complaining. Your destruction will mean its end as well. Just remember, you can endure anything your mind can make endurable by treating it as in your interest to do so." This passage reveals Marcus's understanding that mental clarity comes from accepting our nature as rational beings capable of choosing our response to circumstances. When we resist this fundamental aspect of our nature, our capacity for reasoned choice, we create mental confusion. When we embrace it, we find clarity even in difficult situations. Think about how much of your mental fog comes from fighting against your own nature. Perhaps you're an introvert, forcing yourself into constant social activity, or an extrovert isolating yourself from meaningful connection. Maybe you're a creative person trapped in highly structured work, or a detail-oriented person trying to function in a chaotic environment. Or perhaps you're denying fundamental human needs for rest, movement, nutrition, or purpose, and wondering why your mind feels clouded. Marcus understood that clarity comes from recognizing and honoring our nature rather than waging war against it. This doesn't mean indulging every impulse. That would contradict our rational nature. But it does mean acknowledging our authentic needs and tendencies, rather than constantly fighting against them. Consider how Marcus applied this principle in his own life. Though born to privilege and power, he recognized that his nature as a human being was no different from anyone else's. In Book 2, he reminds himself, "Begin the morning by saying to yourself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him." Here, Marcus acknowledges the shared human nature that connects him with even difficult people. This recognition that we are all subject to the same fundamental human condition creates mental clarity by removing the confusion of seeing ourselves as fundamentally separate from or superior to others. How might this principle apply in your life? Consider your own nature, your authentic temperament, needs, and capacities. How might your experience change if you fully accepted rather than fought against these aspects of yourself? What mental clarity might you gain by aligning with, rather than resisting, who you truly are? This doesn't mean using "that's just how I am" as an excuse for harmful behavior. Marcus wasn't advocating for indulgence, but for honest self-recognition as the foundation for growth. In Book 8, he writes, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This capacity for reasoned choice is itself part of our nature, and exercising it brings clarity. Try this exercise. For the next day, practice observing yourself with compassionate curiosity. Notice when you feel most clear and energized, and when you feel most foggy and depleted. What patterns emerge? Are you honoring your nature, your authentic needs and tendencies, or fighting against it? Simply bringing awareness to this question often reveals sources of mental confusion we hadn't recognized. The principle of living in accordance with nature extends beyond individual temperament to our shared human nature. Marcus understood that humans are inherently social beings designed to work cooperatively. In Book 5, he writes, "We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another then is contrary to nature, and it is acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away." This insight has profound implications for mental clarity. When we act against our social nature, isolating ourselves unnecessarily, treating others as means rather than ends, or viewing life as a zero-sum competition, we create internal conflict that clouds our thinking. When we honor our social nature through cooperation and compassion, we align with reality in a way that naturally clarifies the mind. Consider how Marcus applied this aspect of the principle during the Germanic Wars. Though he could have viewed the Germanic tribes solely as enemies to be conquered, his writings reveal a more nuanced understanding. He recognized their shared humanity and sought diplomatic solutions alongside military ones. This clarity of vision, seeing beyond the immediate conflict to the shared human nature beneath, informed his strategic decisions and ultimately benefited Rome. The principle of living in accordance with nature also encompasses our relationship with the natural world. Marcus frequently reflected on the patterns and processes of nature as a source of wisdom. In Book 7 he writes, "All things are implicated with one another, and the bond is holy, and there is hardly anything unconnected with any other thing, for things have been coordinated, and they combine to form the same universe. For there is one universe made up of all things, and one God who pervades all things, and one substance, and one law, one common reason in all intelligent animals, and one truth." This recognition of interconnection, that humans are part of nature, not separate from it, creates mental clarity by removing the artificial boundaries our minds often construct. When we remember that we are nature, not apart from it, many false dichotomies dissolve, and with them, much mental confusion. In our modern world, where we're often disconnected from natural rhythms and processes, this aspect of Marcus's teaching is particularly relevant. Research consistently shows that time in natural settings improves cognitive function and mental clarity. By reconnecting with the natural world, even through something as simple as a daily walk outdoors, we align ourselves with the larger patterns of life in a way that naturally clarifies thinking. The practice of living in accordance with nature creates mental clarity in several ways. First, it reduces the internal conflict that comes from fighting against our authentic needs and tendencies. Second, it aligns us with reality rather than fantasy, allowing us to see situations more clearly. Third, It connects us with the wisdom embedded in natural processes, the efficiency, resilience, and interconnection that characterize all living systems. Marcus himself maintained remarkable mental clarity despite enormous pressures by consistently returning to this principle. As emperor, he could have isolated himself in luxury, disconnected from both his own nature and the natural world. Instead, he maintained simple habits, honored his need for reflection through his writing practice, and sought to fulfill his social nature through just governance rather than self-aggrandizement. In Book 3, he offers this powerful reminder: concentrate every minute like a Roman, like a man, on doing what's in front of you, with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. Yes, you can. If you do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life, and stop being aimless, stop letting your emotions override what your mind tells you, stop being hypocritical, self-centered, irritable. This passage captures the mental clarity that comes from living in accordance with our rational nature, the capacity to focus completely on what's before us, free from the distractions of aimlessness, emotional reactivity, or self-deception. This clarity isn't achieved by suppressing our humanity, but by fully embodying it, by being like a man, fully present and engaged with reality as it is. The principle applies equally to how we approach our work. Marcus reminds himself in Book 5, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm? Here, Marcus recognizes that purposeful work aligns with our nature as humans. We are made to contribute, to solve problems, to create value. When we resist this aspect of our nature, seeking comfort over purpose, we create mental fog. When we embrace it, engaging wholeheartedly with meaningful work, we experience the clarity that comes from alignment with our deeper nature. This doesn't mean all forms of work are equally aligned with our nature. Marcus wasn't advocating for mindless toil, but for purposeful activity that expresses our humanity. The mental clarity comes not from busyness, but from engagement with work that matters, work that serves others and develops our capacities. Consider how this principle might apply to your work life. Are you engaged in activities that express your authentic capacities and serve a purpose beyond yourself? Or are you merely going through motions that feel disconnected from who you truly are? The answer often reveals whether your work is a source of mental clarity or confusion. The practice of living in accordance with nature extends even to how we approach difficulties. Marcus writes in Book 10, when you have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, remember that your defining characteristic, what defines a human being, is to work with others. Even animals know how to sleep, and it's the characteristic activity that's the more natural one, more innate and more satisfying. This insight that cooperation is more natural to humans than isolation offers a powerful antidote to the mental fog that often accompanies hardship. When facing challenges, our tendency might be to withdraw, to face difficulties alone. Marcus reminds us that this withdrawal often creates more confusion, while engaging with others, seeking and offering support, aligns with our social nature in a way that naturally clarifies thinking. The mental clarity that comes from living in accordance with nature isn't achieved through rigid rules or formulas. It emerges naturally when we stop fighting against reality, both the reality of who we are and the reality of the world we inhabit. As Marcus puts it in Book 4, if you work at that which is before you, following right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract you, you will live happy, and there is no man who is able to prevent this. This is the essence of living in accordance with nature, engaging fully with what's before us, guided by reason, undistracted by what's beyond our control. This engagement itself creates the mental clarity we seek, not as something we achieve through force of will, but as the natural result of aligning ourselves with reality. As you move through your day, practice noticing when you're fighting against your nature, when you're denying basic needs, forcing yourself into inauthentic behaviors, or resisting the fundamental realities of human existence. Simply bringing awareness to these moments of misalignment often reveals the source of mental fog you hadn't recognized. Remember Marcus's words. Everything that happens as it should, and if you observe carefully, you will find this to be so. This isn't passive resignation, but active alignment, a recognition that mental clarity comes not from demanding that reality conform to our wishes, but from the courage to see and accept things as they truly are. Practice gratitude in all circumstances. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. With these words, Marcus Aurelius introduces our sixth principle for mental clarity, practicing gratitude in all circumstances. When our minds are clouded by complaints, resentments, and a focus on what's lacking, we cannot see reality clearly. Gratitude clears this fog, allowing us to perceive the world as it actually is, filled with gifts we often take for granted. In Book 2 of Meditations, Marcus elaborates, "Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave for them if they were not yours." This practice, actively appreciating what we already have, rather than focusing on what we lack, creates immediate mental clarity. Think about how much of your mental confusion stems from a sense of scarcity or dissatisfaction. Perhaps you're so focused on the promotion you didn't get that you fail to appreciate the job that provides for your needs. Maybe you're so concerned with the relationship problems you're facing that you overlook the gift of having people who care enough to work through difficulties with you. Or perhaps you're so fixated on your health challenges that you miss the remarkable capacities your body still possesses. Marcus understood that gratitude isn't just a pleasant emotion, but a clarifying force that cuts through the distortions of complaint and entitlement. When we practice gratitude, we align our perception with reality, recognizing the countless gifts we receive simply by being alive in this moment. Consider how Marcus applied this principle in his own life. As emperor, he faced enormous challenges, military threats, political intrigue, personal losses, and the constant pressure of responsibility for millions of lives. Yet, throughout his meditations, we see him repeatedly practicing gratitude for the simplest gifts, the guidance of good teachers, the support of friends, the capacity for reason, the beauty of nature. In Book 1, he systematically expresses gratitude for the people who shaped him. his grandfather for teaching him good morals and the government of my temper, his mother for instilling piety and beneficence, his teachers for various lessons in character and wisdom. This wasn't mere sentimentality, but a deliberate practice of recognizing the gifts he had received, a practice that clarified his thinking and strengthened his resolve during difficult times. How might this principle apply in your life? Consider the mental clarity you might gain by shifting your focus from what's wrong to what's right, from what's missing to what's present. This isn't about denying difficulties, but about expanding your awareness to include the gifts that exist alongside them. Marcus offers another powerful insight related to this principle. In Book 7, he writes, "Think of the life you have lived until now as over and as a dead man. See what's left as a bonus and live it according to nature." This perspective, seeing each day as an unexpected gift rather than an entitlement, creates immediate mental clarity by cutting through the fog of expectation and complaint. Try this exercise. For the next 24 hours, practice what psychologists call mental subtraction. Imagine specific aspects of your life had never occurred or were suddenly taken away. The supportive friend you never met, the educational opportunity you never received, the health you lose in an accident. Then, return to reality and feel the genuine appreciation that comes from recognizing these aren't guaranteed, but gifts to be treasured. This practice is particularly powerful for clearing mental fog because it works directly with our tendency toward hedonic adaptation, our habit of quickly taking for granted the good things in our lives. By mentally removing these gifts and then restoring them in our awareness, we break through the fog of familiarity that obscures their value. The practice becomes even more powerful when applied to difficulties themselves. Marcus writes in Book 4, "Everything that happens is as normal and expected as the spring rose or the summer fruit. This is true of sickness, death, slander, intrigue, and all the other things that delight or trouble foolish men." This perspective, seeing even challenges as part of the natural order, neither to be resented nor feared, creates a profound mental clarity. Consider how Marcus applied this aspect of gratitude during the Antonine Plague that devastated Rome during his reign. While acknowledging the tragedy, he also recognized that the plague revealed the courage of physicians, the solidarity of citizens who helped their neighbors, and the resilience of Roman institutions. By finding aspects of the situation to appreciate even amidst suffering, he maintained the mental clarity needed to lead effectively through crisis. This doesn't mean denying pain or difficulty. Marcus wasn't advocating for toxic positivity, but for a more complete perception that includes both challenge and gift. In Book 9, he writes, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." This wholehearted acceptance of circumstances and relationships as they are creates the mental clarity that comes from alignment with reality. The practice of gratitude creates mental clarity in several ways. First, it counteracts our negativity bias, our tendency to focus on what's wrong while taking for granted what's right. Second, it expands our awareness beyond immediate problems to the larger context of our lives. Third, it connects us with the present moment, where clarity is always available, rather than pulling us into regrets about the past or worries about the future. Marcus himself maintained remarkable mental clarity despite enormous pressures by consistently returning to this practice. In Book 7, he reminds himself, "Do not think that what is hard for you to master is humanly impossible. But if a thing is humanly possible, consider it to be within your reach." This perspective, focusing on possibilities rather than limitations, is itself a form of gratitude that creates clarity of purpose and direction. The practice of gratitude extends beyond appreciating what we have to recognizing what we've been spared. In Book 6, Marcus writes, "When you are offended at any man's fault, immediately turn to yourself and reflect in what manner you yourself have erred. For example, in thinking that money is a good thing, or pleasure, or a bit of reputation, and the like. This practice, being grateful for the awareness of our own errors rather than focusing on others' faults, creates the mental clarity that comes from humility and self-knowledge. Consider how this aspect of gratitude might apply in your relationships. When irritated by someone's behavior, can you find gratitude for the mirror they provide, showing you aspects of yourself that need attention? When disappointed by an interaction, can you appreciate the opportunity to practice patience or compassion? This shift in perspective doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but creates the mental clarity needed to respond wisely rather than react blindly. The practice of gratitude becomes particularly powerful when facing major life transitions. When Marcus's wife Faustina died after 30 years of marriage, he couldn't change that reality. But his writings suggest he found gratitude for the years they shared, for the children they raised together, and for the memories that remained. This gratitude didn't eliminate grief, but provided the clarity to continue living and serving with purpose. In our modern world, where we're constantly exposed to messages about what we lack or need to improve, this practice of gratitude is revolutionary. By deliberately focusing on the gifts already present in our lives, from the miracle of a functioning body, to the wonder of human connection, to the beauty of the natural world, we clear away the mental fog created by artificial scarcity and reveal the abundance that's always available. The mental clarity that comes from gratitude isn't achieved through forced positive thinking or denial of difficulties. It emerges naturally when we expand our awareness to include the full reality of our lives, both the challenges we face and the gifts we receive. As Marcus puts it in Book 7, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. This insight that our experience is shaped primarily by our perception is at the heart of the practice of gratitude. By choosing to focus on the gifts in our lives rather than what's lacking, we aren't denying reality, but seeing it more completely. This complete vision itself creates the mental clarity we seek. As you move through your day, practice noticing the gifts you might be taking for granted, from the functioning of your senses to the convenience of modern technology, to the presence of people who care about you. Simply bringing awareness to these aspects of your experience often reveals a richness and abundance that was previously obscured by the fog of complaint or entitlement. The practice extends even to how we view our own capacities. Marcus writes in Book 5, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This perspective, finding gratitude for obstacles as opportunities for growth, creates the mental clarity that comes from seeing challenges not as burdens, but as invitations to develop our strengths. Consider how this aspect of gratitude might apply to your current challenges. Can you find appreciation for how a difficult situation is developing your patience, resilience, creativity, or compassion? Can you recognize how an obstacle is revealing strengths you didn't know you possessed? This shift from resentment to appreciation creates immediate mental clarity by transforming your relationship with difficulty. The practice of gratitude also extends to our relationship with time. Marcus reminds himself in Book 2, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone, those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river. The what is in constant flux. The why has 1,000 variations. Nothing is stable, not even what's right here. The infinity of past and future gapes before us, a chasm whose depths we cannot see." This awareness of impermanence, far from being depressing, can deepen our gratitude for the present moment, the only time we ever actually experience. When we recognize that nothing lasts forever, we naturally appreciate what's here now, creating the mental clarity that comes from full presence rather than distraction. Remember Marcus's words, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This simple practice, beginning each day with gratitude for the gift of life itself, creates a foundation of mental clarity that can carry you through whatever challenges the day may bring. Remember your place in the cosmos. Constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul, and observe how all things have reference to one perception, the perception of this one living being, and how all things act with one movement, and how all things are the cooperating causes of all things that exist. Observe, too, the continuous spinning of the thread and the structure of the web. With these profound words, Marcus Aurelius introduces our seventh and final principle for mental clarity, remembering your place in the cosmos. When we become absorbed in our personal concerns, viewing them as the center of reality, our perspective narrows and our thinking becomes clouded. By expanding our awareness to include the vast cosmos of which we are a part, we gain the clarity that comes from proper perspective. In Book 4 of Meditations, Marcus elaborates, "Look round at the courses of the stars as if you were going along with them, and constantly consider the changes of the elements into one another. For such thoughts purge away the filth of the earthly life." This practice, mentally zooming out to consider the immensity of the universe and our place within it, immediately clears the mental fog created by excessive self-focus. Think about how much of your mental confusion stems from treating your personal concerns as if they were the entire universe. Perhaps you're so focused on a workplace conflict that you lose sight of your larger purpose. Maybe you're so absorbed in a relationship problem that you forget your connection to the broader human community. Or perhaps you're so fixated on a particular goal that you neglect the wider context of a well-lived life. Marcus understood that mental clarity requires proper perspective, the ability to see our individual lives as meaningful parts of a greater whole. This perspective doesn't diminish our personal experience, but places it in a context that reveals its true significance. Consider how Marcus applied this principle in his own life. As emperor, he could easily have become absorbed in the immediate pressures of governance, the political intrigues, administrative challenges, and military threats that demanded his attention. Yet, throughout his meditations, we see him repeatedly stepping back to consider these concerns in the context of cosmic processes, human history, and the brevity of individual life. In Book 7, he reminds himself, think of the whole universe of matter and how small your share. Think about the expanse of time and how brief, almost momentary, the part marked for you. Think of the workings of fate and how infinitesimal your role. This wasn't self-deprecation, but clear-sighted perspective, a recognition that seeing our place accurately creates mental clarity. How might this principle apply in your life? Consider the mental clarity you might gain by regularly zooming out from your immediate concerns to consider them in larger contexts. The span of your entire life, the history of humanity, the age of the earth, the vastness of the cosmos. This expanded perspective often reveals which concerns deserve your energy and which can be released. Marcus offers another powerful insight related to this principle. In Book 2, he writes, "Remember how long you've been putting this off, how many extensions the gods gave you, and you didn't use them. At some point, you have to recognize what world it is that you belong to, what power rules it, and from what source you spring, that there is a limit to the time assigned you, and if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and will never return." This passage reveals how cosmic perspective creates urgency rather than complacency, a clear recognition of what matters in a finite life. By remembering our place in the cosmos, we gain not only serenity about what we cannot control, but clarity about how to use the brief time we have. Try this exercise. When facing a decision or concern, practice what philosophers call the view from above. Imagine rising above your current situation, 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, until you can see it in progressively wider contexts. From the perspective of your entire lifespan, how significant is this concern? From the perspective of human history, from the perspective of cosmic time? Notice how this expanded view naturally clarifies which aspects of the situation truly matter. This practice is particularly powerful for clearing mental fog because it works directly with our tendency toward disproportionate concern, our habit of treating immediate issues as more significant than they are in the larger scheme. By mentally expanding our view, we restore proportion and with it, clarity. The practice becomes even more powerful when applied to our identity itself. Marcus writes in Book 4, "That which pulls the strings is the force hidden within. There lies the power to persuade. There, the life. There, if one must speak out, the real man." This perspective, seeing beyond our social roles and self-images to the deeper awareness that witnesses all experience, creates a profound mental clarity. Consider how Marcus applied this aspect of cosmic perspective during the Germanic Wars. While fully engaged in the necessary defense of the empire, his writings reveal that he never identified completely with his role as military commander. He maintained the clarity to see both the immediate necessity of his actions and their limited significance in the broader sweep of history. This doesn't mean detaching from responsibilities or relationships. Marcus wasn't advocating for disengagement, but for engaged perspective, the ability to be fully present to immediate concerns while simultaneously aware of their place in larger contexts. This dual awareness itself creates mental clarity. The practice of remembering our cosmic place creates mental clarity in several ways. First, it counteracts our tendency toward self-importance, our habit of treating our concerns as the center of reality. Second, it reveals which matters truly deserve our attention and which can be released. Third, it connects us with something larger than ourselves, providing the clarity that comes from purpose beyond self-interest. Marcus himself maintained remarkable mental clarity despite enormous pressures by consistently returning to this cosmic perspective. In Book 12, he reminds himself, all things are interwoven with one another, and the bond is holy. And there is hardly anything unconnected with any other thing. For things have been coordinated, and they combine to make up the same universe. For there is one universe made up of all things, and one God who pervades all things, and one substance, and one law, and one reason. This recognition of interconnection, that we are integral parts of a larger whole rather than isolated individuals, creates the mental clarity that comes from alignment with reality. When we remember our place in the cosmic web, we naturally see beyond the artificial boundaries our minds often construct, revealing connections and patterns previously obscured. The practice of cosmic perspective extends beyond intellectual understanding to lived experience. In Book 8, Marcus writes, "This you must always bear in mind, what is the nature of the whole, and what is my nature, and how this is related to that, and what kind of a part it is of what kind of a whole." This ongoing inquiry, exploring our relationship with the larger systems we inhabit, creates an evolving clarity that deepens over time. Consider how this aspect of cosmic perspective might apply to your daily choices. How might your decisions about consumption, work, or relationships change if you consistently viewed them in the context of ecological systems, human community, or cosmic processes? This expanded awareness often reveals impacts and connections that narrow self-focus obscures. The practice of cosmic perspective becomes particularly powerful when facing mortality, our own or others. When Marcus's friend and co-emperor Lucius Verus died, he couldn't change that reality, but his writings suggest he found clarity in seeing this loss as part of the natural cosmic order, not to be denied or resented, but accepted as part of the pattern of existence. In Book 2, he reminds himself, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone, those that are now and those to come. Existence flows past us like a river. The what is in constant flux. The why has 1,000 variations. Nothing is stable, not even what's right here. The infinity of past and future gapes before us, a chasm whose depths we cannot see." This cosmic perspective on time, recognizing our brief moment in an infinite flow, creates mental clarity by freeing us from the illusion of permanence. When we see clearly that everything passes, we naturally focus on what matters in this moment, rather than clinging to what was, or anxiously anticipating what might be. In our modern world, where immediate concerns and digital distractions constantly narrow our focus, this practice of cosmic perspective is revolutionary. By deliberately expanding our awareness to include larger contexts, from ecological systems to human history to cosmic processes, we clear away the mental fog created by excessive self-focus and reveal the interconnected reality that's always present. The mental clarity that comes from cosmic perspective isn't achieved through abstract intellectualization, but through lived recognition of our place in the larger whole. As Marcus puts it in Book 12, constantly think of the universe as one living creature, embracing one being and one soul, how all is absorbed into the one consciousness of this living creature, how it compasses all things with a single purpose, and how all things work together to cause all that comes to pass, and their wonderful web and texture. This recognition that we are integral parts of a living cosmos rather than isolated individuals creates the mental clarity that comes from alignment with reality. When we remember our cosmic place, we naturally see beyond the artificial boundaries our minds construct, revealing connections and patterns previously obscured by the fog of self-absorption. As you move through your day, practice periodically zooming out from immediate concerns to consider them in larger contexts. When stressed about a deadline, remember the span of your entire career. When worried about a conflict, consider the history of human relationships. When anxious about a decision, reflect on how it might appear from the perspective of your entire life. This practice doesn't diminish the importance of your immediate experience, but places it in a context that reveals its true significance. The result is a remarkable mental clarity, the ability to engage fully with what's before you while maintaining awareness of the larger patterns of which it's part. Remember Marcus's words, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." This recognition that we participate in cosmic processes through our perception and response is the essence of mental clarity. When we see our place accurately, neither inflating nor diminishing our significance, we align with reality in a way that naturally clarifies thinking. The path to lasting mental clarity. We've now explored 7 powerful principles from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that can transform mental fog into crystal clarity. Let's briefly review these principles and consider how they work together to create a foundation for lasting mental clarity in any circumstance. First, we learn to distinguish between what we can and cannot control, focusing our energy on our responses rather than external events. This fundamental shift immediately clears away the mental confusion that comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. Second, we discovered how to view obstacles as opportunities, seeing challenges not as roadblocks, but as the very path to growth and development. This perspective transforms resistance into engagement, clearing the mental fog that comes from fighting against reality. Third, we explored how to rise above the opinions of others, valuing our own well-considered judgment above external validation. This liberation from others' expectations creates the mental clarity that comes from internal alignment rather than social approval. Fourth, we examined how to embrace impermanence, accepting the changing nature of all things rather than clinging to what's passing or resisting what's arising. This acceptance aligns us with reality's flow, clearing the mental confusion created by demanding permanence from an impermanent world. Fifth, we learn to live in accordance with nature, honoring our authentic needs and tendencies rather than fighting against them. This alignment with our deeper nature creates the mental clarity that comes from internal harmony rather than self-conflict. Sixth, we discovered how to practice gratitude in all circumstances, appreciating what we have rather than focusing on what we lack. This shift in attention reveals the abundance that's always present, clearing the mental fog created by complaint and entitlement. Finally, we explored how to remember our place in the cosmos, expanding our perspective beyond personal concerns to the larger contexts of which we're part. This cosmic viewpoint provides proportion and perspective, clearing the mental confusion created by excessive self-focus. These 7 principles aren't separate techniques, but interconnected aspects of a unified approach to mental clarity. Each reinforces and deepens the others, creating a robust foundation for clear thinking in any circumstance. Consider how they might work together in a challenging situation. Perhaps you're facing a significant career setback, a project failure, job loss, or missed promotion. The first principle reminds you to focus on what you can control, your response, rather than the external event itself. The second helps you see this setback as an opportunity for growth and redirection. The third frees you from excessive concern about others' judgments of your failure. The fourth principle helps you recognize the temporary nature of this situation. This too shall pass. The fifth guides you to honor your authentic needs and values as you navigate this transition. The sixth helps you find gratitude, even in this difficulty, perhaps for the lessons learned or the support received. And the seventh expands your perspective, helping you see this setback within the larger context of your entire life journey. Together, these principles create a mental environment where clarity naturally emerges, not as something you achieve through force of will, but as the natural result of aligning with reality as it is. Marcus himself demonstrated this integrated approach throughout his life. As emperor, he faced challenges that would overwhelm most of us: military threats, political intrigue, personal losses, and the constant pressure of responsibility for millions of lives. Yet, his writings reveal a man who maintained remarkable mental clarity by consistently applying these principles in combination. When the Germanic tribes threatened Rome's northern borders, he distinguished between what he could and couldn't control, viewed the threat as an opportunity to strengthen the empire, remained unmoved by critics of his military strategy, accepted the impermanent nature of political stability, honored his nature as a protector of his people, found gratitude for capable generals and loyal troops, and maintained cosmic perspective on the conflict's place in human history. This integrated approach allowed him to respond with wisdom rather than react from confusion, to see clearly what needed to be done, and to act decisively without being clouded by fear, anger, or despair. The same clarity is available to you, regardless of your circumstances. These principles aren't reserved for emperors or philosophers, but are accessible to anyone willing to practice them consistently. Each time you apply them, alone or in combination, you strengthen your capacity for mental clarity. Start small. The next time you feel mental fog descending, whether from stress, conflict, uncertainty, or overwhelm, pause and ask yourself, which of these principles might help me see more clearly right now? Do I need to focus on what I can control, view an obstacle as an opportunity, rise above others' opinions, embrace impermanence, honor my nature, practice gratitude, expand my perspective? Often, just asking these questions begins to clear the fog, revealing which principle offers the most direct path to clarity in that particular situation. With practice, these principles become not just techniques you apply, but ways of seeing, habitual perspectives that naturally create clarity without conscious effort. This is the state Marcus himself achieved through years of philosophical practice. A mind naturally inclined toward clarity rather than confusion. As you continue your journey with these principles, remember that mental clarity isn't a destination, but an ongoing practice. There will be days when the fog seems particularly thick, when clarity seems elusive despite your best efforts. This too is part of the human experience, and Marcus would be the first to acknowledge it. In Book 5 of Meditations, he reminds himself, begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. And so, none of those things can injure me, for nobody can implicate me in what is degrading. This passage reveals Marcus's recognition that mental clarity requires daily renewal, that each morning we must recommit to the principles that keep our vision clear. It also reveals his compassion for himself and others when clarity falters, as it inevitably will at times. Approach these principles with the same balance of commitment and compassion. Be diligent in your practice, but gentle with yourself when you struggle. Remember that even Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and one of history's greatest Stoic philosophers, had to remind himself of these principles daily. That's why he wrote his Meditations, not as a polished philosophical treatise, but as personal reminders of truths he knew, but sometimes forgot in the heat of daily challenges. The path to mental clarity isn't about achieving perfection, but about consistent practice, returning again and again to these principles, especially when fog descends. With each return, the path becomes more familiar, more natural, until clarity becomes your default state rather than an occasional achievement. As we conclude our journey through Marcus Aurelius's wisdom, I invite you to carry these principles forward into your daily life. Let them be your companions in moments of confusion, your guides when the path seems unclear, your foundation when uncertainty shakes your ground. Remember that the mental clarity Marcus achieved amid the enormous pressures of ruling an empire is available to you in the comparatively simpler challenges of modern life. The same principles that guided him through war, plague, betrayal, and loss can guide you through workplace conflicts, relationship difficulties, health challenges, and life transitions. The invitation is simple but profound. Practice these principles consistently, and watch as mental fog gives way to clarity, confusion to understanding, resistance to acceptance. This is the gift Marcus offers across the centuries, not abstract philosophy, but practical wisdom for living with a clear mind in an often confusing world. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Marcus Aurelius's timeless wisdom. May these principles serve you well on your journey toward lasting mental clarity.